book now, and that book is called um, The Turnaround. And basically, it's about, it's a fictional story, but it's all motivational, inspirational type stuff. And this football player who is a small town quarterback goes to this school, and it's this old school coach who literally just like he wants to, turn these guys into stop, turn them into tough guys. And the way that he does it is so demeaning. Nobody wants to make a mistake. Everybody's tight. You know what I mean? So finally, after years of losing, they fire this guy. They bring in this new coach, and dude, he's literally just like setting the standard and telling them like, you are who you are because of all the decisions that you've made. You're the one in control. You're the one who's making the decisions to be where you're at right now. But today you have a fresh start. You have a clean slate with me, and we're going to make the decisions to be our best going forward. And like, it's amazing when you surround yourself with pessimistic, negative kind of outlook, like that's what you turn into. You know what I mean? So surround yourself with that vision of, you know what I mean? I'm the one in control of what's going on around me. Yeah, obviously there are things that are out of your control, but you can control your effort and your attitude and how you move forward and things, and do this series, Darren Donnelly's Sports for the Soul, amazing book series, easy reads, all touches on different sports figures. In fact, Herb Brooks is in the first one where this guy's having a hard time, and Herb brings him back and talks through the Miracle on Ice and how it helps the coach kind of learn a lesson that then he applies to his team. And you know what I mean? Leadership is great, man. And coaching is great too. I think it's one of the things that I would like to do personally as we develop this podcast is maybe we get a coach, you know what I mean, who can come in and kind of coach us on how do we develop an excellent podcast, right? How do we develop an excellent voice and brand into getting out to LA Kings fans and hockey fans out there? Because we want to have a positive impact on those folks. We want to be the bright, shining light or voice in their day that's bringing a good perspective from the Los Angeles Kings fans' point of view. And then obviously we want to be able to share our experiences from LA Kings corner.
Yeah, sure. So in order to become a master, you have to at first be willing to become a fool, is what they say. So, I've tried my hand at various avenues of podcasting and blogging and this, that, and the third. And I've always thought to myself, well, okay, I'll record something and I'll upload it, or I'll write something and I'll post it. But if everybody could do that, which they can do that, everybody can do that, but there's something missing there. So if everybody becomes successful by uploading or posting, then everybody would be successful. So that's not such a bad idea, right? To bring in somebody who's been there, who knows how it's done, and say, yeah, it's not just uploading, it's not just posting. So, for example, an analogy might be like keeping up a car. Like there's more to a car than putting the key in the ignition, starting it, and every now and then you get an oil change. Right? In order to make that car last, there's other things that have to be done. And these guys that do have successful podcasts obviously know something that most everybody doesn't. So that's a great point.
And we forget that too. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to get negative, but I don't think that society promotes the benefit of having a coach. We all know it because we've all had coaches, and we've had great coaches and we've had bad coaches, and we know the difference. You know what I mean? And we've had good teams and we've had bad teams, and we know the difference. Um, Surrounding yourself with that key leadership. Oh my gosh, man. When you got somebody who just inspires you and you're fired up to go to practice every day and you're fired up to play games and they help you bring out the best in yourself, dude, it's phenomenal. John Cooper is a guy, Tampa Bay head coach. Um, he was coaching junior B when we were playing in the national tournament. He was coaching the Metro Jets. And then a year and a half later, my teammate at Buffalo State was on that team. And, and then I had played with other guys that had Cooper along his path to get to the NHL. Tyler Johnson, local Spokane guy. And dude, that guy just, and I don't know if it's his legal background and the way that, lawyers know how to work the words, but probably has something to do with it. If you're, if you're an intelligent wordsmith, and you're putting those pieces together for these guys and you're framing it in the right way, because framing is a big piece to that puzzle, then I think that's going to give you a leg up. Is there any coach that stands out to you when you listen to these post-game pressers that you feel like, man, that guy's really good with his words.
Josh, I'm gonna let you take this one. I think it's funny they're bringing up on the Spit and Chicklets podcast earlier. We know when we were talking about like officiating, and I think we were kind of frustrated when Mikey Anderson, Josh, when he got hit from behind from McDavid, and McClellan didn't really make a big deal out about it. He didn't say much.
Mm.
Picking the right time to be that voice, that leader. I forget. I think it was Merles on the Spit and Chicklets podcast was saying the guy. I think who's the guy for Dallas they got behind their bench right now? Is that Bonus or is that am I got the wrong team?
No, Bonus was there last year when he took over for Montgomery, who Montgomery's now the head coach of Boston, who took him to the best, best season ever. Dallas's head coach,
Pete Dubois.
Oh, that's Peter DeBoer. Okay, I'm thinking
and that guy's been around, top teams for the last 5-6 years since New Jersey, right? New Jersey, San Jose, Vegas, now Dallas. Like,
yeah, he seems to always be coaching good hockey teams.
Yeah, as far as the coaches that stands out, it's kind of hard for me as NHL coaches that they 'cause I'm getting some a little bit of heat on Twitter for making too much out of the post game pressers or the pre game pressers, and the people would say, well, they just say what they need to say, then they go on. I understand that, but I think it does matter what you say. Clearly, I think it matters what you say. And so Bowness, right? He was the coach of the Jets. This is the most recent example I can think
oh,
of.
wow.
Bowness was the coach of the Jets. They asked him a question about, after game five when Winnipeg made their exit. And Bowness just told the truth and said, I'm disgusted with the effort from our top guys. And it's disgusting. And this has been going on since January. And so Jets fans really got behind that. And I think one of the reasons they got behind it is because Paul Maurice, coach of Florida, right, said the exact same thing about that Jets core group. So there's just something in now. Look, when he says that, when Bowness says that, some change is going to come for better or worse. But as Jets fans know this, change has to come for better or worse. It doesn't really matter which direction it goes. So Bowness comes up, says that. Wheeler comes out and says he didn't like the way that what Bowness said. He said he would like to have that behind closed doors. And Jets fans didn't like that. So they liked what Bowness said and they didn't like what Wheeler said. And I think because it just seems like Wheeler was not taking accountability for what was going on out there. And so that's the most recent example I can think of a coach coming out and telling the truth. So again, now change is coming in Winnipeg, whether Bowness gets fired or whether it's a Jets fire sale out there. So I think there's utility in the truth. It's really all that I think we're saying when these pregame or postgame pressers.
I think it's interesting too when the message is being said, but also I think it matters, like you're saying, Josh, like who the message is being sent to, and to kind of bring up, tie it back to the Kings. We saw Terry Murray for a long time, who he was given due credit for building up the youth of the LA Kings, right? But from what I've heard and just what I read, that he was kind of the guy that would be really hard on the young guys, right? He would keep the young guys accountable. Whereas when they made the change to Daryl Sutter, from what I heard, he seemed to be harder on like the veteran guys, right? Like he was kind of holding those guys accountable. So maybe it was at the right time for both. I don't know. It worked out well for the Kings in their situation when they switched from Murray to Sutter, obviously. But and maybe that's kind of interesting too. Like who, and is that just the coaching philosophy there, or do they weigh in the time and the projection of where this team's at? Or maybe some coaches are more likely to just be heavier on those veteran guys, like right, like you guys are making the big bucks, you guys are getting the top minutes. I'm going to keep you guys accountable, whereas maybe some other guys are more likely to make the young guys earn their keep in order to stay up. So I'd be curious what like John Cooper's philosophy is there, or if he everyone just says he's a player's coach. I think he tries to get the best out of all his guys, but he seems like he's got all his players' backs.
The coaching philosophy thing you bring up, Marv, is spot on. I think that's the difficulty in being a coach in professional sports is to get all, let's call it 20 of these personalities to get behind and really and channel a central idea, a central philosophy that the coach brings to the table. Right. So that's the challenging job. And with all the parity in the league, I was thinking about this the other day, and I think we were talking about it, is every one of these players is good. Ultimately, like the is there really any bad players in the NHL that, I mean, we can maybe, but for by and large, most of the players are good. So the challenge comes in getting these good players to all buy in to whatever the coach's philosophy is. And it seems as though the teams that are the coaches that are able to do that, those teams are the most successful. I Now this might be a little bit ironic considering Boston just lost, but Boston seems to have always been one of those teams where they have a bunch of guys who buy into the coach's philosophy.
And they have gone through a little bit of a rotation in their coaching staff over the last few years. Claude Julien, right, was the one who was there for the longest. Was it Claude? And then they had another French Canadian come in and took over, and then obviously Montgomery just took over this last year. One of my favorite coaches of all time is Barry Trotz. I feel like that guy spent forever in Nashville, and then he went and won a cup in Washington, and he ended up going over to, was he with the Island and then go to Washington? I can't remember exactly what his career path was like, but he's a guy you don't hear a lot about. But man, that guy seems like his teams always play well.
All right, boys. Well, Rye, you asked me to do the intro. Do you want to get her going here? The season review for the Los Angeles Kings.
Let's do it.
3, 2. We're already rolling, but 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. Welcome to LA Kings Corner. I guess I'm de facto host tonight. My name is Joshua Norris. I'm joined here by my two cousins, Ryan Marvin and Corey Marvin. And today we're going to be discussing the season as a whole. We're going to do the season review. Again, this is the LA Kings Corner. What's the quote you use now, Ryan? For the fans, by the fans. And so that's what we're looking at today. We did the series recap. Obviously, the Kings lost in 6 games to the Edmonton Oilers, and it was unfortunate, but here we are. That's why Corey's got the golf background down there to it's symbolic of where the Kings are these days. But today we're going to look at the season as a whole. And with that, I'm going to throw it over to the actual host here, Ryan.
Hey, thanks, Josh, for doing that. Great to join you guys tonight. Just looking back on 2022, 2023, obviously didn't end the way we wanted to, but coming into the season, there were some high hopes. I think if we look back and we look at the preseason rankings, the Kings were predicted to win the Pacific Division. Didn't end up winning the Pacific Division, but did pretty much hold a playoff spot throughout the duration, and a lot more stability through the regular season. Statistically, the Kings won 47 games, 25 losses, 10 overtime losses for 104 points with a .634 win percentage. There were some key stats that I think stood out to me from a regular season perspective. One was the increase on their power play. The power play looked great throughout the year. They were clicking at 25.3% all season long, which is great. I mean, anytime you can get up over 25%, that's amazing. It's a huge asset to being able to win games. The PK was definitely lower on the totem pole for the NHL standards. You want to be up clicking around 90%. They're around 75.8%. And obviously we know that that's a key improvement that they're going to need to look to next year. There were some big players for the Kings this year. And I think Adrian Kempe was one of those guys. 40 goal scorers don't come very often for Los Angeles for whatever reason. I think it's the Gretzky curse. There was something that happened where McNall made a deal with the devil to make that deal happen a little bit. And, so we've had a little bit of a regression in score ever since the Gretzky era. But what has, Adrian Kempe's 40 goal season, following up a 35 goal season, what has that meant to the Kings, and what were some things that kind of helped him get there?
Oh man, what a year for Kempe. Real quick before I start, I thought our motto was for the fans by AI. I thought we were using Chat GPT to run this podcast. So
Yeah.
if it's for us, I better get buckled up. I thought this thing was pre-programmed. No, anyways, I love it, man. What a breakout couple years for Kempe. We touched on it a little bit ago. I just remember Dustin seeing Kempe at training camp after signing him as a rookie, and just he could see it. Like this guy's a star. I remember him texting us our group chat, but it was it was a slow development, right? Like we'd kind of mentioned, and I think you had in the notes a little bit. Maybe other teams should kind of take note. Like nowadays in the NHL, these first round draft picks are kind of inserted into the lineup, expected to produce right away. Where we know traditionally, you had to pay your dues in the AHL for a few years before you even got a sniff and were, even hopeful to even get a shot to stay up with a big club. But I think the Kings did it right with Kempe. I think they took their time. They knew what they had in this guy. He did it the right way, right? They made him play the game the right way. It's definitely a 200-foot game with Kempe. This isn't a guy scoring 40 goals out there floating at the blue line and just only giving offense. It's not at all what you got from this guy. You may look at the numbers and think that, and the way that he scored goals, you would assume that he's all skill and maybe just a smooth skater. But no, this guy, he does it all, man. He plays 200 feet. He's aggressive. He's nails. He's hard to play against. The Kings had him play center. I know Sutter had him, be a responsible center man in the lineup before we bounced him back to wing. So just for a guy like Kempe, I think that we got to look back at the timeline. This guy was just kind of slowly getting better each year. You felt like maybe a few years in, you're like, man, this guy, I swear he's like almost there. You could almost just feel it, like he was gonna break loose. There was a couple years on his way up where he was doing so many good things, and maybe the puck wasn't going in at times, and you were like, oh man, but they were patient with him, right? They took their time. They knew what they had. You could see the way he played the game the right way, and thank goodness they did, because man, where would we be this year without a guy like Kempe? Really, I mean, we haven't had a true winger like him at this point where we can say he's a bona fide top line player, scoring 40 plus goals in LA, man. Holy, I didn't think we'd see it again. It just doesn't happen. We know guys come here from the East Coast to light it up, and then they're playing the West Coast out here where you got to play 200 feet. You got tough games every night against rivals, and yeah, you don't tend to put up that many goals. So just really, really excited for Kempe. I think that what we've seen the last few years and how seen him do it and the way that he's just handling himself, I really don't look at him as a guy to have a regression. I think this is Kempe. Adrian Kempe's the real deal. I'm really, really pumped that we got him locked up moving forward.
That's great. That's great, Core. Yeah, he did it in multiple ways too. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't just power play goals, or it wasn't just, empty net goals or the things that went there. It was all aspect of his game were fantastic. 5-on-5, he contributed. He had 11 power play goals. That's the most power play goals by a King since Alexander Frolov back in 2008, 2009, which I love Frolov. He wore number 24, big wide base Russian. But what a way to finish that off too, right? Like being able to close out the season and cap off 40. Did he have a hat trick that game to get 40? But great year by him. I would say, Josh, do you have anything to add or thoughts to add on Kempe?
Well, if I can digress for just a moment, right? Did I botch the intro job, or did you want me to facilitate? I was thinking the whole time, like, oh shit,
No, dude.
did I mess up the assignment or what? Okay, good.
No, dude.
Somebody
Well,
open up
I can add
Chat
a little bit.
GPT.
Yeah, right. I can add a little bit to the Kempe game. And you know what I love about him? Yeah, I love well, I think in the end it was 41 goals. What I love is that he's got a little piss and vinegar to his game too, which I think is missing from top to bottom, or from the lineup as a whole. And he's got that. And Marv or Corey said this in the Game 6 review when he got it, when we scored it to make it 3-2. It's like, yeah, that's Kempy's got this offensive swag. Every goal scorer has that swagger about him, which is different than this might get a little complicated. It's different from Velarde's it, what Corey was saying too. Velarde's got it, whatever it is, he's got it. And Kempy has this swag about him that all goal scorers have. So he's got the piss and vinegar and he's got the swag, that's also something I feel like has been missing from the elite players on the Kings for a long time. So that I can add about Adrian. If I can throw this in there too. So I was just kind of looking at the schedule. I might be kind of taking over here, but I was like, because we're talking about scoring goals and Kempy having 41. I was looking at the schedule for the Kings from October, obviously, all the way through. And what I'm looking at is I remember so many times throughout the season we would say, "Oh, the forwards are buzzing, the forwards are buzzing, the forwards are buzzing." And even last year we would say that the forwards are buzzing, the forwards are buzzing. And I can remember there were so many times where it looked like the Kings scored so many goals in these games. So I'm looking at 7-6 at Minnesota, then a 9-8 loss at home to the Kraken. Now, it looked like throughout the year that we were able to score goals, and maybe we were able to score goals because we had to score so many goals because our goaltending was a little bit suspect, right? Then somewhere along the way, after the New York game, obviously, when Quick kind of he had a bit of a stinker there in New York, and then we subsequently traded him. Then the goaltending was just a little bit better, and all of a sudden we weren't giving up 4 or 5 and didn't have to score 6, 7 to win games. So then from there, it looked like I don't know. I think maybe there's possibly an identity crisis there now because we were a team that was scoring a bunch of goals and had to score a bunch of goals. Then our goaltending gets solidified and our defense kind of gets solidified. And then now we're only giving up 2. And I think maybe we were thinking, oh, this is how it was supposed to be all year. But all year we were scoring goals. So I don't know if that played a role heading into the Edmonton series where we were a team that was scoring a lot of goals, had to score a lot of goals, but then all of a sudden we had this ability to play defensive hockey like we wanted to all year. So I hope I didn't take the reins on that. But as far as a season review, that would be a bit of a
dude. That's so perfect, man. I mean, seriously, because I was watching a little look in with Gretzky. Gretzky was talking about right and how unique it is in comparison to the regular season. Like all these teams that are vying for the Stanley Cup, they believe they can win it, but they don't know if they can win it. We're sitting back here believing that the Kings can win it, but we don't know if they can win it. Even when they won it, we didn't know if they were going to win it. You know what I mean? It's like you just don't know how it's going to happen, what it's going to take. The one thing I will say that he mentioned that really stood out to me was that Edmonton, when he played with Edmonton, they were front runners. And when they got the lead, they didn't sit on the lead. They kept their foot on the lead. If Gretzky got 2 points early, he was going to keep going and get 3 or 4 that night. You know what I mean? And that's what McDavid did with Edmonton. We saw it with Draisaitl in their game 1 against Vegas last night. I mean, Draisaitl basically tried to single-handedly bring that team back. But the Kings, to me, I think when they turn defensive, like something's there that they forget to play offensive as well. You know what I mean? And can you combine both? Can you still score goals? You know what I mean? Like in a 9-8 game, like, but also play defense. You know what I mean? Can you? And that's, I think, what they're missing is the ability to say, hey, boys, it's a point night. You know what I mean? Like we're in the NHL. You're not going to get many of those. Like, but it's not a point night in the fact that it's going to be a barn burner 9-8 point night. It's going to be a point night because we're going to bury these guys 7-2, you know?
Yeah.
So
We need, I think we need to keep that foot on the gas more, you know? It's always easier to say after the fact, but, I think that as in regards to Kempy, we're talking about, again, the way that guy skates, just to kind of wrap it up on him, man, with the new NHL, the way it is, what an asset to have a player like that, the way he moves around. He's got that Swedish stride. He's smooth. And yeah, we're gonna need more. Not having Fiala at 100% was a bummer because that was another guy, right, that came in that definitely added immediate offense, right? We know that that's been a lack in LA for quite some time. Even on the cup teams, right? We struggle to score goals.
Dude, I felt like he and Fiala, Kempe and Fiala had immediate chemistry early in the year. Those two guys were clicking, dude. I remember them, making beautiful plays across the Royal Road, finding those seam passes to one another where we didn't see that a lot before. You know what I mean? And those guys almost pushed each other to that all-star level pace. And that's what we need, is because those guys are in their prime. Now you've got Kopitar and Doughty on the tail end of their careers, and you've got these guys in their prime. Deneau, I follow. Those guys are right there. That's the meat of your team into the future. That they got a next couple of years. But I agree, dude. Fiala was a huge boost for Kempe, because that also meant the teams had to defend somebody else, another winger they had to defend, right? And so you take some attention away from them, open up some more time and space, and maybe get some better matchups. Keep rolling, guys. Hey, one of the big things of the year was that goaltending situation. Kings have had Jonathan Quick in net for the last decade plus. And
what a contract. What a contract.
The guy, yeah, it was a horrible contract. The Kings couldn't get out of it. He was not playing great. He was in a contract year, and unfortunately, we were all hoping to see the Jonathan Quick of old. You know what I mean? Hey, man, you're in a contract year. Put your best game out there. Let's finish your career as a King. And they still might get him back. Who knows? There's dumber things that have happened, but Phoenix Copley comes in and takes over the starting job. Cal Peterson, a guy that we thought could come in and take that job. I don't know what happened there, but man, that contract might be another doozy. But Phoenix Copley comes in and saves the day and literally solidifies the goaltending situation back there. Doesn't end up seeing a playoff game, but then gets nominated for the Masterton Trophy for a player who exemplifies qualities such as perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to hockey. How big of an impact do you think it was for Copley? And, could you see those traits coming through in the way that he played, and how so? Josh, you want to jump on that one?
Yeah, sure. And my apologies for the for the opening statement there. I wasn't trying to beat a dead horse on the foot on the gas pedal thing. I think it was just something where, looking at the course of the season, it just feels like, and in regards to Adrian Kempe scoring 41, it seemed throughout the course of the season that we proved ourselves that we could score. And that's really all I was trying to say. But as far as the goaltending thing, the goaltending situation the Kings endured throughout the season, the first thing that comes to mind is shout outs to Rob Blake for making that deal. Some deals maybe we don't like that he's made throughout his tenure as general manager of the Kings. This one in particular, I happen to love, and it took some stones to make, because the entire fan base was, Jonathan Quick is a legend out here in Los Angeles. And to actually pull the trigger on a deal like that, again, took some stones. And I think you saw the fruit of that, let's call it the fruit of that labor, and in bringing Korpisalo and Gavrikov. So it was a huge trade. But so yeah, it looked like our goaltending was, and you mentioned Cal Peterson. So here we go. Look, why do I think that Cal Peterson didn't turn out to be the Cal Peterson that I thought he could be? I think it's the same story as every other goaltender that played backup to Jonathan Quick. Now, not to do this, like, I'm not going to get on the pod and bury anybody, but we sacrificed a lot of goalies at the altar of Jonathan Quick, a lot of good goalies, and goalies that have actually gone on to other teams and proven that they can be number one guys. But I think now the stones it took for Rob Blake to make that trade, that opportunity was available long ago, and it just never manifested itself. So then you had Cal Peterson basically laying in limbo, wondering when his chance is going to come. And I think goalies need reps in order actually to find out what you got. Whereas Cal Peterson would come in every now and then. Maybe he'd have a good game, maybe he'd have a bad game, but that's a product of while sitting on the bench and waiting for an opportunity, right? So I can't recall ever Cal Peterson really getting the nod of approval, let's say, and saying, "Hey, you've got the next 10 or something like that." So then the opportunity did come, and again, shout out to Rob Blake for making that deal. But Phoenix Copley, obviously, just this is kind of, I mentioned this in the opening statement too. Copley didn't, I don't know. He obviously played well, but he played just well enough, which is apparently all that we needed to actually really start winning games and going on runs. And then when we added Korpisalo, it was from my vantage point and looking at the numbers, we actually established that we actually got an established number one guy. It's not to necessarily that Copley isn't, and I don't want to take away for anything that Copley did, but all the Kings needed, as far from my vantage point, was just some solid goaltending, not bad goaltending.
No, that was really well said, Josh. Well broken down too. And I think in regards to Cal Peterson, to kind of piggyback on what you said, which again, a lot of goalies and a lot of those goalies' opportunities came during Jonathan Quick injuries, right? And I think when there was multiple reasons why all the people that know me know I give the guy a hard time. He's amazing. There's no doubt about it. Absolute legend in LA. Long contract at the time for a guy that played the way he did. I think that was always the worry. Longevity, right? I mean, that guy, the way that the athleticism that guy had, you just knew injuries were going to follow, and they certainly did. And in his absence, you did see a lot of guys rise up and kind of make names for themselves. I guess we don't have to go listing them all, but there was a time where Cal Peterson, I think, did kind of show up. I think it was a Buffalo draft pick. We kind of made a deal for him. Felt like we kind of got a little bit of a steal when we got Cal away from Buffalo. He wanted to come play for us. And I think the issue with Cal, and having talked to Skipper a little bit, is that they did tell him that he was going to get the keys to the castle. They did tell him that he was going to be the guy going forward, and that Quick was not going to be the guy. But they never acted on those words. I think there were moments there where Cal did have the net, probably times where Jonathan Quick was hurt again or out for a while. And we saw him we did see some shine from Cal Peterson. We can't say it was consistent enough. Definitely all we're going to remember is what we've seen most recently. But I do remember kind of seeing this guy, man, this guy's tall. He's lanky. He was dropping butterfly, keeping his chest upright. If you know Jonathan Quick, not a lot of upright chest. The guy lived his life on his belly, post to post, legs spread wide like a lady you see in Vegas. But I won't bring that up on this podcast, family show. But I think that it's a lot about confidence when we want to talk about Cal Peterson. I talked to Skipper. Skipper knows some people in the organization. He said that his confidence was just shot. And he was having a really hard time with Jonathan Quick and getting over that mental hump about, you know what, I am the guy. They said I was going to be the guy. They gave me the keys to the castle. They paid me as if I was going to be given the keys, and then they never let me drive the car. So that's going to be a tough spot, man. You got a brand new car. You're ready to drive it. You got the keys, but you got some dickhead riding shotgun who just won't get out of your car. And we're passing exits left and right. And this guy should have been out. We're down in Ventura. Next thing you know, we're passing Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, Sacramento, San Francisco. This guy's still right. Get this guy out of the damn freaking passenger seat. I want to drive this damn car. This thing's sick. But anyways, that's my rant. So hopefully Cal Peterson gets another shot, dude. I think that's going to be our tandem going forward. With that contract and a guy like Copley who can come in and be calm like I need to be right now. I think it would be good to maybe Copley's a kind of a guy where he won't feel threatened as much, Pete Cal. And Blake said it himself in the exit interview. They want to get him to be an NHL goaltender again. So
that's awesome, dude.
My blood pressure's up right now.
That's fantastic, dude. Couple deep breaths. I'm proud of you because the years, over the years, you and I have gone back and forth over Quick. And I've always been, a fan. Like the guy won the Conn Smythe Trophy. He's got 2 Stanley Cups, even though I really feel like the Kings won in 2014 despite his performance. It was, I've loved the Kings goaltenders for as long as I can remember. Kelly Rudy, was the guy that I loved. And dude, we always kind of loved the backups too. You just root for those guys, when they get in there, right? You want them to steal a game. Mario Goslin's a guy that I remember as a kid, dude. They had Rick Knickel come up from the San Diego Gulls back in the day. You know what I mean? Like those are guys that you pulled for. Felix Potvin. But when you got a guy that comes in and that can take the net and he's your guy, it is so nice. But the game's changed, right? The game has changed. It's no longer a 1 goalie league, especially in the regular season. You see a team like Boston where they got Ullmark and Swayman, and those guys loved each other. You know what I mean? They loved each other, and definitely wonder if there was definitely a lack of chemistry between Cal and Jonathan Quick. And like you said, there was a lot of those other goaltenders that have been with the organization and did extremely well. Whether it's Jonathan Bernier or Martin Jones or Ben Scrivens or Peter Budaj was a guy that came in and did well. You know what I mean? Like they've had their fair share of guys just because of the structure of the LA Kings, the defensive style of hockey that's played, that can still win hockey games. So like you said, the goaltending situation didn't need to be great. And I personally don't think it needs to be great to win in this league. I think you need to have a guy who's solid. You look at Skinner in Edmonton, he's not great. You look at Brossoit in Vegas, he's not great. You know what I mean? But if you get a guy who can play and win you some games and you start believing in him back there, I think, the sky's the limit.
For sure. It's crazy with goaltending. It's all about those timely saves, right? You're not letting in, there's always a pivotal moment in every game where it's like a guy comes up with a save and you just need one, whether it be before a period's over, to start a period. Maybe you're down 1 and you just can't go down. You can't go down 2 right now. You get that save and then, oh man, you get the next goal, and momentum's a funny thing, right? The tide can change real quick with one save in a hockey game. So you're right, Josh. That was a great breakdown, dude. We just need somebody to be good enough to give the guys a chance to win every night. But I think to win the big one, you got to have guys in there that can steal them too. And to be fair, Jonathan Quick definitely did a few of those in big moments, man. There was no guy that, and I think I think really the competitive nature of Jonathan Quick, that guy was such a competitor, right? You talk to all the people. I listen to Spit and Chicklets a lot. You guys know that. I know Biz likes to talk about the Kings on there a lot, which I appreciate, having been in Ontario. And he talks about those guys, and just those guys are competitive off the ice and playing volleyball too. You know what I mean? Whether they're playing hacky sack or ping pong. I think he's just one of those dudes. And I think you have to have it. You got to have to want the net, right? To be good. But yeah, I would love to hear, like, at some point, Cal's perspective on that too, because I don't know, man. You guys tell me, maybe I'm wrong, but to me, other than him catching on the right side, I guess we didn't bring that up. That's something that maybe we should talk about. They call him full right? He's got the catching glove on his right hand, which is kind of unorthodox as a goaltender. You don't see it a lot these days. And in fact, Josh, you might have brought this up in just our talking. I mean, how many really good goalies can you think of off the top of your head, that were really successful catching with the glove on their right hand?
I'd be hard pressed to name you one. Really. So,
Grant
I just
Fuhrer,
know
off the top of my
Jose
head.
Theodore, Rick DiPietro.
Vokoun.
Who?
Yeah.
Thomas Vokoun from Florida. He's a full right goaltender.
Don't even remember him.
He played for Atlanta.
Grant Fuhrer was probably one of the best ones that won the cup.
Yep.
Do you guys mind if I could just add something on the heels of what Cora said? Because I don't really like when on the Devils app they call Cal a sieve. I don't really like that much. But we were talking before we actually introduced the show about the utility and truth. Now this happens to be the truth about how we feel about certain things. Now, so it's great, we all get together, the family members get together, we start LA King's Corner, and we start a podcast, and obviously that's fantastic. I love doing this. But I or we would be hypocrites, especially if we're talking about pre and post game pressers about hearing no truth at all and just hearing cliches and much we don't like it. But I would be a hypocrite if I came on LA King's Corner, and I understand we want to be professional, but a lot of times professionalism means pussyfooting around the truth or just slightly alluding to the truth without saying it. Right. But that's not exactly how I would venture to say we all would be in disagreement with that. We just want to tell the truth, or at least the truth about how we feel. Sometimes that comes out in certain ways, and sometimes we're going to be right, or sometimes we're going to be wrong. But and again, we would be hypocrites if we didn't come on here and unleash the truth about how we feel about certain matters. And sometimes, again, a cold pizza is still pizza. You know what I mean? So as we're talking about truth, I want to make sure that it's clear that if people are listening, hey, look, we're going to tell the truth about how we feel sometimes instead of, hey, and just sort of, dance around it.
That's the one thing that I think is going to have to differentiate us from some of the, LA Kings podcasts that you hear. You know what I mean? Like these guys that are in the post game pressers, you develop a relationship, and because you have that relationship, sometimes maybe you're not asking the hard questions, or you're not reporting the hard information, digging in, and you can kind of allow those cliche, like glaze over the big things and not really dig into maybe why you made that decision. Listening to the exit interviews, I thought the questioning was pretty good, was fairly good. Blake and McClellan and the players all said the same shit. They all said the same stuff. You know what I mean? Like one message, it goes all the way down. And that's cool, dude. I love that. You know what I mean? They're all on the same page. It's like a bond, right? But the other thing is like, is anybody pushing back on that behind closed doors, asking questions like, hey, you know what I mean? I don't have many years left. I want to win another cup. You know what I mean? Like Kopi and Doughty got to be thinking, I don't have how many cans can I kick down this road? How much longer can I kick the can down the road before we have to, call it a day here? And I'm sure they want to put another banner. Kopi talked about wanting to retire as a king. Well, do you want to win another cup as a king, or do you just want to retire as a king? Because there's a difference.
Ooh, I didn't think about that. That could be, that could just be, I'm sure he wants to win another cup, but words speak volumes rampant. Also, what do you mean by that, right?
Yeah. And hey, look, I love Anze Kopitar, dude. The class that guy brings to the organization, that's exactly what you want. You know what I mean? If you're going to pay $24 for a beer and a dog, or $50 or whatever, or $100 to get your wife and kids some nachos and pretzels, at Staples Center, then you want those guys to be class acts in my mind. And definitely Kopitar fits that bill. No, and, a lot of the reasons in an article that was written by LA Kings Insider, they talk about him being so good at the little things, right? The things that don't go on the stat sheet. And intangibly speaking, he shows up every day. He's consistent. He's a great leader. I remember when I texted you guys way back in the day when I was at the LA Kings rookie camp, dude, he came out and skated one game, and then they were like, all right, you're going to main camp. You know what I mean? They took him out. He was so good. He was wheeling around everybody. And he's led the team in scoring for the last 17 years or something like that. I think there was one year he didn't lead the team in scoring. I thought that this was going to be another year with Fiala, but then Fiala got hurt, so he was able to kind of keep that crown, sort of speak. But I know, Josh, you've often talked about Kopitar and some of the things that you would like to see out of him. What are some of those little things that teammates are looking at when they look at Kopitar that make him such a great leader?
Yes. I'll say this too. So as we do a season review, I can remember this is one of the things like because the beginning of the season was so long ago, right? Or at least it
Yeah,
feels like
for
that.
sure.
And I was really thinking to myself, I think the question marks for all of us might have been, well, Kopitar, Quick, and Doughty aren't getting any younger. Here they are, they're another year older. So the jury was kind of out on how they might perform. And so here I was super hard on Kopitar in the group chat, and then unfailingly I can get thrown the look who's led the team in scoring since for as long as we can remember, and I don't really have much to say about it, right? Because there he is again leading the team in scoring. I think my criticism of Kopitar is actually unfair, although somehow I still think it's objective in a way, in that he's just logged so many miles that he looks a little slower, and I would like to see a little bit of fire, but that's not who he is. And actually, I wouldn't probably be calling for the fire out of Kopitar if he didn't have so many miles, right? Because then he would be able to do the things that he used to do. But as far as the question goes, what do I think they mean when they say little things? I think Core mentioned this. It's obviously a 200 foot game. It's his commitment to the defensive side of the puck. It's just a commitment to a job to do, specifically in the defensive zone. But also, moreover, what I would say is what they mean when they talk about Kopitar is probably the way that he conducts himself off the ice. Never heard of a controversy about Anze Kopitar after a game, after practice, at a night. Nothing. Never heard anything negative about Anze Kopitar's life outside of hockey. Not one thing. So he is a absolute pros pro. I think that's what they mean by that. What is it? What's the award? Is he up for it again, Lady Bing?
Lady Bing, yeah.
Uh,
4 penalty
uh,
minutes on the year.
yeah, right. So,
It's
well, there
hard
you
to
go. They
do.
staying out of the box even. Fucking hell. Right.
It's
So
got to be
he,
hard to do with that much ice, right? Just to touch on the penalty minutes, like
yeah,
if you're playing that much, you might take a penalty here and there, but sheesh.
Shit,
yeah.
dude. I played freaking adult league and I was in the box for 4 minutes and I was like, 4 games.
I'll keep going, Josh. I didn't mean to cut you off
No,
there.
no. I think that was about it. Actually, as far as the fire, I did see him throw a water ball down a hall this year.
Oh,
That was
nice.
nice. That was
I
nice
saw
to
him
see.
break a twig at some point too.
He was pissed off this year, Kopi.
Yeah.
He must
He's
have had
like
something
that.
going on.
Yeah, dude, he's awesome, man. What a name too. Kopitar. I mean, my buddy Brian Van
Rouge
Geen,
Kopitar.
like he loves the Kings just because we love the Kings so much. He knows how much it means to us. But he'll say Kopitar like Brian thinks the word Kopitar means like badass, the best. Like it's fucking Kopitar. You know what I mean? It's just
That's
funny, like
awesome.
hearing it from him. He's like, "Oh, it's Kopitar," and it does. He exudes that. He is that good. The guy lives up to his own freaking name, for crying out loud. But the little things, right? I mean, dude, if you guys out there listening, if anybody's listening, maybe it's just Mom or Dustin or Jen or maybe not. This guy, I've never seen somebody while playing hockey live and being in the corner. We're so lucky we get to see it, but man, you can throw pucks at this guy's feet. You can throw him bouncing pucks. It can be wobbling. It doesn't matter. That guy can just catch it, hold it, absorb it, turn around, defend a guy, move it back up the wall to the D. This guy is probably the way that he handles the puck, the way that he corrals it, the way that he receives it, the way that he passes it. It's like it's like playing a hockey game. If you guys, we talk about the bubble between our group a lot. And if people don't know what the bubble is, if you've ever played hockey on Sega Genesis or now PlayStation, NHL, EA Sports, when you get the puck on the game, you get a little bubble underneath your player. It usually turns blue or red depending on what control you are. Well, you could throw the puck at Kopitar, and he'll catch it wherever. His bubble's big in that sense. You know what I mean? Where you give him the puck, 3 feet to his left, 3 feet to his right, a foot behind him. He's going to catch the puck in stride, and it's going to be instant possession, and he's going to be able to make a play like it was never a bad pass. So that's a skill that I think is a little thing that the elite guys, you almost don't even notice that they do it because it's like becomes so expected of them that they do it so often that it's not like an abnormality, or it's not something that really like it doesn't like show up on a score sheet, but that guy catches the puck and gives the puck and in the zone control wise, like I've never seen it before. That guy just in the power play when you need possession, he's got one hand reaching at a stick. He touches the stick. It's like he's got Velcro on the puck, Velcro on his stick, reels it back in like he's got a fishing reel, and he's just ready to make a play without needing to rebalance or, lose a step. It's incredible. Like that stuff for me for Kopitar, it's crazy.
And we used to call him Gassitar, right? Because he would look like he ran out of gas. And his endurance has gotten so much better over his career. And I partially wonder if one of the little things that they mentioned was how he positions himself on the ice, because I think hockey's such a cognitive sport that if you're positioning yourself well, then you're minimizing the amount of miles that you're traveling. So you're not getting gassitard, right? So as cool as Kopitar's name is to celebrate something that's awesome, Kopitar, the gassitard name was definitely a thing that we also felt when we were tired. So they did a good job, protecting the miles that he put on this year. For instance, he used to lug that puck on the power play go back 200 feet, come back on the breakout. Every time there was a breakout, he doesn't need to do that. You know what I mean? Save his energy on that. He didn't kill probably as many penalties as he had in the past. Maybe that's why their numbers were down a little bit this year, saving him a little bit there. But the guy's always up against the other team's top line, and he still is able to put points on the board. And you know what I mean? He's playing for a franchise that if he was playing in New York or New Jersey or Boston, where the NHL writers would stay up past 9:00 at night and watch the games, they would know just what an amazing talent this guy is. He should be up for the Selke. It's embarrassing that he's not up for the Selke this year and only up for the Lady Byng. The guy is the epitome of a defensive forward shutdown player.
It was really cool to see Stoley come out and say something on Twitter about that. I know you could say that he's biased, it's his teammate, but Stoley said it himself. He's like, I don't usually do this and come out and say it, but absolutely Kopitar should be on there. You know what I mean? No doubt about it.
Well, the fact that all three players were from the Eastern Conference too. You know what I mean? Come on.
Yeah, so here's an example, right? Pavel Datsyuk, if you look at his career numbers, I think they hover around, I don't remember, don't cook me for getting this wrong, but I remember a couple seasons he had about 75 points here and there, and he was still up for Selke. And people look at Pavel Datsyuk as one of the all-time greats, and maybe he is. But he played in Detroit, and then people in the East Coast watched him more. Like Anze Kopitar is at least that good, and he doesn't get mentions with the Datsyuks or even the Bergerons on some level. Not to take away from anything those guys have done, but it's just to illustrate or to expand upon Brian's point. Had this guy played back east, he would be mentioned. He would be still probably an elite player in today's game. He is, but he's not mentioned as such because of the location he plays, and that's unfortunate.
He probably would have won the Selke multiple times, right?
Yeah. And we would have a video game with a king on it, EA Sports. Yeah. I'm still hot about that, dude. If real quick, just a quick rant, and it means nothing. We'll move on. As Kings fans growing up, being a child, we love playing our video games. We love the Kings. It was a big deal, to get your team's player on the video game. And the LA Kings had been, not very good for a long time. We know that. Any Kings fan knows that. We finally had our moment to rise to the top of the mountain. In fact, that we peaked that mountain twice in 2012 Stanley Cup, 2014 Stanley Cup. And still no Los Angeles King was able to get on the cover of the EA Sports NHL video game. And I can tell you why. They decided to go right when we won a cup. They decided to go to this fan voting gimmick where we got outvoted, by the East Coast bias. And I was so hot because the Chicago Blackhawks ended up winning another cup, but then they stopped the gimmick and they went back to Kane.
They did it for 1 year.
they stopped the gimmick after we won a cup, and they put Kane and Taves on there holding a cup together. But somehow EA Sports, Anze Kopitar, Mike Richards, Jeff Carter, Drew Doughty, Jonathan Quick, not one of those guys were able to get a cover on the NHL and NHL EA Sports video game. with cups in 2012 and 2014. That honestly blows my mind. And just think about all those little kids in LA that wanted to see their team on the cover of that video game. And now, NHL, you're to blame. I'm coming to you.
Why don't they just do a regional release for those video games and make it like a collector's edition, like a baseball card? You know what I mean? Like have X amount of LA releases. You know what I mean?
Think Claude Giroux got on it or something, dude, during our thing from a Philly fan vote, Philly scumbag fan vote. And they got Claude Giroux on there,
They got Zegras. They put Zegras on there.
Oh yeah, Zegras has one already in Anaheim. Unreal. Anyways, end rant.
Wow. Yeah, we don't want to go down the road of the Kings missing on Trevor Zegras in the draft.
Oh boy,
we did that earlier this week.
No, but that'll be a good segue to being excited this summer about we'll have to do a draft episode for sure.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. There's really a lot to look forward to too. You know what I mean? Like in where we're at. And I think that let's get into where we're at. Like we heard both Rob Blake and we heard Todd McClellan talk about where the team's at, right? The gap, closing the gap on, the Edmontons and the Colorados and the Boston Bruins and whatnot. And I was at the game when the Kings played Boston in January at home. They ended up losing, but man, that was one of the best hockey games I've seen. And I mean, I hadn't seen a game live in a long time, and that was the first one. So what a hell of a game to go to. But it was 1-1 or 2-2 until third period, and Boston got two quick ones on just a couple quick breakdowns, and that was the end. That ended up being the game. But they played such a good hockey game that I really felt like at that point they could compete with anybody. In fact, the next game that we went to, they played Edmonton, and they kicked the crap out of Edmonton. It was like 6-2 that they beat Edmonton at home, and then they took it to San Jose the following game. So quite a good stretch of games in the corner that I got to see. And, Josh, you had talked about this a little bit earlier. I'm hoping you can kind of shed some light on it. The gap, closing the gap. Why are we still closing the gap? What is this about the gap that they're talking about?
Yeah, so the closing the gap thing came now. Again, I want to make sure I'm clear about this. I believe, if I have this right, Todd and maybe a couple other people were actually asked the question about closing the gap. So when you're asked the question about closing the gap, then you're prompted to answer whatever that question is and try to come up with something about closing the gap. But Ryan and I were talking about before we actually pressed record and started running the show, was that we don't want to hear about closing the gap. What does closing the gap mean? Really what it means is everyone else is better than us and we're not there yet. Now, maybe that was their best effort at actually telling the truth. That's not when Ryan talks about the Boston game, that's not what we saw. We saw a team that when they're fully healthy can compete with the Bostons, the Colorados, the Edmontons, and all these other high quality teams. So what are they talking about when they're closing the gap? And Ryan and I were saying, look, even if that's the case, if you feel like you need to close the gap, no, we want to create the gap. That's what we want to be. We want to be the gap. We want to be the guys, the team that everyone else is working towards becoming like or surpassing, right? So the mentality of when we talk about closing the gap, so that kind of might speak to the mentality of the Kings towards the end of the season there was we felt like we were inferior to the teams because we had to close that gap. And I don't know. We're talking about a season review. And again, as Ryan brings up the Boston game, and there was a couple, we actually competed with the Devils. I think we lost in overtime. So there's another high quality team. I don't know. I didn't see much of that, much of a gap. I thought we could compete and we were right there. So as far as closing the gap goes, I don't know. I don't really like the phrasing of that question to not put it on Todd because again, he was asked the question. But I would much rather be the focus of the team being not how we're going to close the gap on these teams that are better than us, because that's what closing the gap means. I want the mentality to be towards the offseason is to be, you know what, how are we going to be better than those teams this season, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. We all understand that it takes time, right? Things take time. But as I look around the NHL playoffs and at Vegas's lineup in particular, and I see guys like Alec Martinez or Braden McNabb or, Chernak over in Tampa Bay, or what other former Kings are still out there playing in the postseason? Tyler Toffoli for Calgary. These were guys that we dished for a rebuild. You know what I mean? Like, and these are all guys that are in their prime, you know what I mean? And contributing to their teams in a significant way. And when I look at the NHL and the structure of the NHL structure now, I don't really see the need for superstars. I know Seattle's losing tonight. I think they just lost 4-2, but they just beat the defending Stanley Cup champions in the first round with a bunch of second, third line guys. Yanni Gourde and Bjorkstrand, like these are guys that, were picked up in an expansion draft. Their second year in existence, and they're 1-1 in the second round of the NHL playoffs. And Kings haven't won a playoff series since back in 2015. Guys, what's going on? You know what I mean? Like, what is the deal? Why can't we win?
Gap, bro.
Close the gap. He says we want to close the gap 5 to 10%. Dude, there is no gap. That's the mindset. That's the mentality. There is no gap. The parity in the league, there isn't a gap. You know what I mean? Like, you want to talk about a gap in society between the rich, the elite, and everybody else. There is no elite in the NHL. The parity is there across the board. Everybody can compete. So what is the small incremental thing? What's the mindset change that we're going to approach? And what young guys, what talent are we not getting out of our players? How can we not be winning? And I know we talked about this when Gretzky said you think you can win, you believe you can win, but you got to go out and play the games, and you still don't even know if you can win.
Yeah, you're right, Ryan. I think that you guys started to talk about it last podcast when we talked about, did the young guys get enough experience this year, right? And I think maybe that's what they're just talking about. Our young guys, maybe they're being realistic, and they just don't quite think that our youth, or I don't know, because Drew said that he really liked the mix that we had between older guys and younger guys this year. I think they're starting to gel in the locker room. I know Blake kind of touched on that a little bit in his exit interview, the very little bit that I listened to. But I think we when we look back to like 2012, and we had some veteran guys. We went out, we added some missing pieces like Scuderi and Mitchell on the back end. We had to bring in Mike Richards. That was a huge deal, and give up a couple really key pieces in Shen and Simmons to make that happen. And then even then, still, we didn't have enough. We had to go out and get Jeff Carter. But we had, the Matt Greens, the Jarrett Stoles, the Justin Williams, those older guys, which now those older guys, we got, it's Kopitar, it's Kempe, it's Deneau, I guess it's Arvidsson. Maybe we're a few pieces away, I'm not sure. Like, and I guess we don't need to always compare everything to 2012, but I guess when something works, you kind of want to use that as a template, right? So you kind of like to look to it. We certainly try to do that with the righty lefty D men pairing. So to kind of just sum up and where we're at moving forward, I'm really curious to where the Kings think they're at. I guess they're trying to close the gap or mind the gap. I don't know what Blake's doing. We know Pop's he's out here for beach volleyball still, probably.
He's going surfing.
He's going surfing. But I'm curious, what the team's going to look like come next year. That's a puzzle piece that it would be so cool to be just to have a seat in the room and just hear the conversations that they have as far as really putting those pieces together with the contracts. You got trajectory, you got value to look at. We certainly got a plethora, I would think, of assets that hopefully they still hold their value. I think Josh was touching on a little bit. We spent all of last year, I know just in talking to you guys and talking to Jeff and about, what a good job Blake did about adding without losing a lot of our really big pieces, So I think he's done a good job there.
Yeah.
But what's the next part of that look like? Are we going to need to move some key pieces to bring in guys that Ryan just mentioned who are out there still playing in the battles, who are ready right now, that are the gap instead of trying to close the gap? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting what the team's going to look like next year, and what moves are, what pieces they're going to try to pull, and what strings they're going to pull. So
One thing that I think that looking back and reflecting on those winning teams, and one of the pieces that I really loved when he came over was Deneau. Deneau has been such a solid piece to the puzzle. And partly because the dude was coming off a trip to the Stanley Cup finals, right? In the Eastern Conference finals. And so winning is kind of a contagious thing. Winning is like a belief set, a mindset. And winning is something that you experience. And that experience makes you a winner. Now, when I look down the roster and I look at these guys' statistics from their time getting to the NHL, what I want to see is I want to see more of these young guys that are highly touted that are winners. You know what I mean? Brant Clark, dude, the guy's mega talented, but his team didn't win. You know what I mean? Did they win? Did they make it to the CHL finals? I want to see these guys come in that have proven that they can win somewhere at some level, somebody who can ride it all the way, because that's what Richards did. He won everywhere he went. That guy was a winner. No, he wasn't the most beautiful skater. He wasn't the most skilled guy on the ice. Justin Williams is another perfect example. The guy is a winner. Same thing with Jarrett Stoll and Matt Green. Those guys in Edmonton, they figured out, I mean, they didn't win the cup, but they made it to the finals. You know what I mean? They knew what it takes to get there. And that's what I want. That's what I want to see if we're going to make any offseason moves. If you're going to let go of some young talent for a trade, make sure you're letting go of some guys that don't have that winning experience and getting some guys that do have that winning experience.
I agree, Ray.
Chris Drury's another name that comes to mind as far as winners. Yeah, so that's a good point that both you guys made great points about the gap. First of all, Marv saying, of course, said going out and getting players that are the gap instead of trying to close the gap. And then actually Ryan brought up the point about what is the gap even, because the teams are so close. And the analytical community would come out and say, well, Boston is one of the best hockey teams in hockey's existence. And just because they lost a 7-game set to Florida, the playoffs are a crapshoot. That's what they would say. But here we are in the playoffs, and Boston just got eliminated, and Colorado with McKinnon and Makar just got eliminated, and Vegas is going to give Edmonton a run with their superstars. So there is parity, and it looks like every team is a lot closer than we might think. And so what is the gap? And when we talk about closing the gap, well, what does the gap mean? So I think that's a great point. If I can just throw this in there, because the question was thrown out about where we are at. And I don't know, from what I can tell, from my perception is I would say I still think the Kings have a decision to make going forward about who they want to be. And I think you also have to take into account the way that not only hockey is moving forward, but professional sports as a whole is going forward. Now, if you look at, okay, so the NFL, football, somewhere along the way, it became a passing game, right? With Rodgers and Mahomes and Brady. And they eventually, they said, we're going to try to score as many points as we possibly can and hope that our defense comes up with a stop when we need them to, right? That's kind of what football is. He's 35-32 in the Super Bowl, was it? High scoring games have happened in the Super Bowl, but that specific score that's what football is today, right? So then you look at basketball and you have Stephen Curry and Damian Lillard pulling up from anywhere on the court. So here, I'll throw this in because I have a little bit more of a grip on basketball than I do football. It wasn't so uncommon 7 to 10 years ago to see an over-under be tallied at 190. Okay, now what the over-under is as a standard is somewhere around 220. So that's a 30-point increase from about 7 to 10 years. And then even when you have two top offensive teams playing against each other, that over-under could be set at 240. So what I'm saying is basketball is now an attacking offensive-minded sport just like football is. And that's where these young kids, that's what they are so good at, is going forward with the puck, with the ball, as being offensive players. That's what we see. Now, I don't think that hockey is really any different. I see hockey kind of going the same way. And when you have now again, they lost, right, with McKinnon and Makar. Now McDavid and Draisaitl are still there, but it looks like the game is headed in a direction where you score more goals than the opponent does. That's what it looks like. Now, I don't know if the Kings are able to, one of the things that we fancy about the 2012 and 2014 Kings, again, as Cora said, not to bring everything back there, is that the 2012 and the 2014 Kings were sort of the last of the Mohicans, so to speak, and they beat those teams that were trying to do where the game is going, right? Does that make sense? So they played that old school traditional style hockey against the new age teams and came out on top. And I think that's an added piece of why we love those teams so much, is because we did it the way, quote unquote, that we think the game, how it should be done, right? Now, I only bring this up because we talked about the fluctuation in the Kings throughout the season, where they're scoring a bunch of goals, then they got the goaltending, then they got the defense, and then they kind of started and changed it again. So where are we at today? I still think the decision is to be made, and the decision is this: do we have the personnel that matches up with how the game is moving forward, or are we going to try to do it the opposite way? And I'm not sure. So that's a tough call to make. From my vantage point, looks like the personnel we have is we can score 7, 8, 6 goals whenever we need to score them. So.
Yeah, it's a great point, Joshy.
Such a great point, Josh. Such a great point. Yeah, I think that's the direction that the league is headed. But from my experience in life and things, when the crowd is going one direction, you probably want to be heading the other direction. And that's what they did in 2012, right? So are we following the herd, or are we the ones creating the gap, sort of thing? And I would just love, like you said, this is an opportunity to really create and find our identity. What is the Kings' identity? We knew what it was back then. Do we know what the identity is right now? Do we know? And
it's definitely changed, right? I would
Sure.
say from 2012, 2014. I think the Kings are playing a more exciting brand of hockey as far as players who can all skate. For the first time ever, we had, pretty much all the players on the Kings are good skaters. They can all move. They can all move the puck. You got guys on our fourth line who are, goal scorers coming out of junior and where they're from. So I think that part of the Kings is heading the right way. We talked about this before, and I know we got to wrap it up here, but just the piss and vinegar Josh mentioned, and Skipper not thinking that we're tough enough for the playoffs. And Ryan, asking about what our identity is going to be. Somehow we got to find a way to maintain what Josh is saying. We got to be able to score goals with the best. But here we are now. We're talking about piss and vinegar, and Skipper, saying we got to get tough. We got to get guys that can play, that are winners in the playoffs. So I think it's a tough balance, man. I think that we are going to see some personnel changes here in the next couple of years. My biggest question, and I don't know, this is a season review podcast, but we were always wondering where the Kings were at, where they're headed with guys like Kopitar, Quick, and Doughty being on the tail end of their career. And we guys got young guys like Quentin Byfield and Kempe, and were we going to fully blow it up and just go like super rebuild? They kind of did. I don't know if it's like not a hybrid on the fly, but they retooled pretty good. But now taking that next step and the gap, dude, I keep laughing about the gap. We're just going to keep going back to the gap. This next step is a tough one. I think, I really do. I think it would have been a lot easier if we had gotten past Edmonton to talk about that next step, or to maybe try to conceptualize it in my mind. But because here we are again, playing golf, losing to Edmonton in the first round, one less game this year. But I think the Kings were a better team this year.
Oh my
so it's
God,
kind of a
that's
bummer.
exactly what everybody said in those exit interviews, dude. Well, we're a better team, but Edmonton got better as well.
Well, you know what? Edmonton did add some pieces. I think we were a game a couple saves or a game away from really taking a stranglehold there in game 4. But you're right. If you're being honest, there were moments against Edmonton where like, dude, these guys are just all over us. So
yeah, dude. Yeah. The thing is that we got better and they got better as well is such a cop out. You know what I mean? The bottom line is we didn't freaking game plan for these teams this team like we should have. We didn't adjust well enough on the fly when we should have. We should have been the one dictating the pace instead of letting them dictate to us. You know what I mean? We sat back like we were afraid. Dude, the Kings are a great hockey team, man. When they're on attack mode and possession mode and they're going. I know they didn't have a full 100% lineup, but there was a lot of fear in there about putting the wrong line out against, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. I'm really interested to see how Vegas plays game 2 and how Vegas plays game 3 and 4 in Edmonton when they don't have the line change.
Well, the only bump, the power play merchant Edmonton Oilers, as Josh put it, they got to go against the Asian dealers of Vegas and beat the house. So what do you do when you're a power play merchant trying to buy power plays? Because that's where you're good and that's where you score. But you're standing here at the checkout line and this Asian dealer staring you right in the face saying, the house always wins.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
What an intriguing series it is, right? Look, just last thing, right, before I do, we have to go. Now, I do think we stumbled upon the nail on the head throughout all. I think sometimes maybe I've derailed us, but I think as a tandem, we've hit the nail on the head. And I think why we turned out to be unsuccessful in the end is because we don't really know who we are, and we're kind of good at everything, but you eventually have to pick a lane. So when Corey was saying that looks like that we're playing a more exciting brand of hockey, that's the thing is it looked like we were, and we were scoring when we were doing that. And then all of a sudden it looked like we decided to make a quick U-turn and do a 180 because we wanted to play a different way, although we proved to ourselves we could play this way. But now we're going to try to do this thing. And we went into a playoff series not knowing exactly how we wanted to approach it because we didn't know who we were at our core. Now, when we talk about Ryan makes a great point about when the crowd is going this way, you want to do the other, go against the grain on that. Look, I think the decision is a tough one, but I'm all right with either one. But you got to pick a lane and stick with it and go for it. I think that was the mentality. That's what they were trying to do down the stretch, is to pick a lane and go for it. But I think in the end they made the wrong decision because when we played on attack mode, as Ryan was saying, and we were able to score these goals, 7-6, 9-8, although 9-8 was a loss. But even a 6-0 against Pittsburgh, right? When we could, I think, find a way to do both. But I think it comes from attack mode first. I think when we talk about asking the questions instead of being the ones that have to answer, I don't know. So I'm not sure. I don't think that we knew exactly what we wanted to do.
Awesome, guys. Hey, well, we had a long season. It was a good one. Thanks, guys, for hopping on and chatting about the season. And I'm super excited to hit up next episode where we can kind of look forward to the draft and some optimistic things that are going to happen in the off season. Will be interesting to see the business side of things and how that plays out with some key re-signings, and we'll be back to discuss those things here shortly in the future. We love you, and we love that you're following us, and we really appreciate your support. Share this podcast with any other Kings fans that you have out there, hockey fans in general, or people that are just friends overall. We love that support. You can find us on Twitter, or as Josh calls it, the Devil's app, and Instagram at LA Kings Corner. And then if you would like, we'd love to hear from you. Got any questions or topics or things that you think would be good for the podcast, send us an email, lakingscorner@gmail.com. Thanks for joining us.
Stutzel.